I remember the exact moment my face cracked. I remember the feeling of it, the way a person can feel their own expression changing, the moment before the tears actually come, that instant where you realize you are no longer going to be able to hold whatever you have been holding inside. What I did not know in that moment was that I had just committed a social transgression that would have consequences I could not have anticipated. I had cried in front of the bishop's wife, and in my community, there are things you simply do not do, and that is one of them. My name is Hannah. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio. I married at 19 and left at 27. On this channel, I tell the stories that lived behind closed farmhouse doors, and today I want to talk about the particular power of tears in a culture that has learned to fear them, and what happens when a woman's composure breaks in front of someone with real social authority. I need to start by explaining what the bishop's wife represented in our community. She was not an official position exactly. There was no title, no formal role, but every bishop had a wife, and that wife occupied a particular space in the community hierarchy. She was, in a real sense, the moral custodian of the women in the district. She was the one other women looked to for guidance on what was appropriate, what was too modern, what was acceptable behavior. And she reported directly or indirectly to her husband, who reported to the other church leaders. What this meant, in practical terms, was that the bishop's wife was constantly observing. She was watching how other women dressed, how they carried themselves, how they managed their children, how they treated their husbands, and what she observed had weight. It was not official. She was not writing anything down. But her observations informed conversations that happened at church, at community gatherings, in the quiet spaces where decisions about women's behavior were made and reinforced. The day I cried in front of her, I was not expecting to see her. I had gone to the general store in the small town nearest to our district. It was a Tuesday morning and I needed thread and other small supplies. I was not dressed for a social encounter. I was wearing my work dress, not my good dress, and my prayer cap was slightly askew in the way it gets when you have been working all morning. I was standing in the thread section, my mind somewhat absent, thinking about a conversation I had had that morning with Jonas. He had been particularly cold toward me, a withdrawal that had lasted nearly a week at that point. I still did not know what I had done to trigger it. I had been trying very hard to figure it out, to correct whatever mistake I had made. And I was exhausted from the constant monitoring of myself, the endless questioning of my own behavior, the search for the offense that had caused the weather to change. The bishop's wife came around the corner of the aisle, and for a moment we simply looked at each other. She was dressed impeccably, as she always was. Her prayer cap was perfectly white, perfectly shaped. Her dress was the same style as mine, but somehow on her it looked authoritative rather than humble. She asked me how I was doing. It was a social question, the kind people ask without really expecting a genuine answer. I should have said something brief and pleasant. I should have smiled and said everything was wonderful, praised God for the day, mentioned that I was grateful to be there serving my family. That is what I should have done. Instead, I felt something inside me break. It was a small thing, really. It was not a dramatic collapse. It was just that, in that moment, I could not maintain the composure I had been maintaining for so long. I could not pretend that everything was fine when I was so tired of pretending, when I was so exhausted from the constant work of managing myself, of reading my husband's moods, of trying to figure out how to be good enough. So I cried. Not dramatically, my face crumpled a little, my eyes filled with tears, and then I turned away because I knew, even in that moment, that I had just made a terrible mistake. The bishop's wife reached out and touched my arm. She asked what was wrong, and I, in that moment of vulnerability, told her. I told her that I was tired. I told her that my marriage felt cold. I told her that I did not know what I had done wrong, but something was clearly wrong because my husband was not speaking to me and I could not figure out what I needed to do to fix it. She listened. She was not unkind. But I could see something shift in her face as I spoke. I could see her absorbing this information, filing it away, understanding that she now had something important to report. She told me gently that marriage was difficult. She told me that sometimes a wife had to look to herself to understand what was not working. She told me that she would pray for me. And then she left the aisle, leaving me standing there with my thread, my face wet with tears I had just spent years learning not to cry. I left the store quickly after that. I did not finish my shopping. I drove home in a state somewhere between terror and exhaustion, understanding that I had just made myself visible in a way that was dangerous. I had shown weakness. I had admitted to the most connected woman in the community that something was wrong with my marriage. And in a community where marriages were supposed to look stable, where wives were supposed to appear content, where a woman's job was to make the situation look manageable, that admission was a kind of transgression. Within a week, my mother-in-law came by the house. She said she was concerned about me. The bishop's wife had mentioned, she said, that I seemed to be struggling. Had I been taking care of myself? Was everything all right between me and Jonas? I knew immediately that she was reporting back, that the bishop's wife had shared what I had told her, and now it was moving through the community, being discussed, being analyzed, being used as evidence of something. What that something was, I was not entirely sure, but I understood that it was not good. By the following Sunday at church, I could feel it. The way other women looked at me had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. There was a kind of wariness, a distance. They had been told something, or they had intuited something from the way the bishop's wife was treating me. And what they had intuited was that I was a woman whose composure had broken, a woman who had admitted to difficulty, a woman who could not be fully trusted to maintain the image of stability that was essential to a functioning community. The bishop did not come to my house. That was not necessary. The message had been delivered through the women's network, which was in many ways more powerful than any official intervention could have been. What I had done by crying in front of the bishop's wife was alert the community that I was a potential problem. Not a woman being abused or struggling unfairly, but a woman who was not managing her own emotions well enough, a woman who was not strong enough to endure what was expected of her without breaking, a woman who might, if she continued down this path, become a source of instability in the community. I stopped going to the general store. I asked my sister to pick up supplies for me when she went to town. I became more careful about where I went and who I might encounter. I learned very thoroughly that tears were not actually allowed in my community, or at least not tears shed in front of someone with social authority. But something else happened too, something I did not recognize at the time. By trying so hard to hide what I felt, by trying to contain it, I started to become someone I did not recognize. The exhaustion, which had seemed manageable when I could at least acknowledge it, became something I had to hide even from myself. The cold silence in my marriage, which had seemed like something I might eventually understand or fix, became something I had to pretend was not happening. I think about what would have happened if I had been allowed to cry that day. If the bishop's wife had responded with genuine compassion instead of information gathering. If my tears had been met with someone asking what I actually needed instead of someone worried about what my tears meant for community stability. If I had been permitted to acknowledge that something was wrong without that acknowledgement being treated as a failure. I think about all the women in my community who learned, as I did, that emotions were not safe to express in public, that vulnerability was a liability, that the only acceptable response to struggle was to smile and say everything was fine. I think about what we might have been able to do together if we had been allowed to see each other's struggles instead of having to hide them. The crying I did that day in the general store was the beginning of the end of my marriage, though it would take 2 more years for me to actually leave. Because in that moment, I understood something that I could not quite articulate until much later. I understood that staying in a community where my tears were treated as a social threat, rather than as a sign that something needed to change, meant I was choosing the community's stability over my own survival. It took me a long time to understand that choice was mine to make. It took me even longer to understand that making the other choice was not a sin. But that day in the general store, when the bishop's wife touched my arm and I felt her absorbing information that would be used against me, something inside me started to shift. Something started to understand that I could not spend my entire life managing my own emotions for the comfort of a system that was harming me. If you grew up in a place where your tears were treated as information to be gathered rather than as a sign that something was wrong, if you learned to hide your struggles because vulnerability was dangerous, if you were ever made to feel like your breakdown was a threat to the community rather than a sign that you needed help, I see you. Your tears were not a failure. They were a truth that the system around you could not afford to acknowledge. This is my story. If it stayed with you, Tell me in the comments and subscribe if you want to keep hearing the truth from behind the prayer cap.